Well. We've got some new news, some new drama, some new information around the collapse of G4TV in just under 1 year. In addition to Frosk doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the melty, and former G4 staff coming out and having something to say in particular about the need to reboot the original show and this perception that it needed it, or that it wasn't okay in its old format. That and more after a super quick word from this video sponsor. Check it out. Huge shout out to this video sponsor, the Sandbox. The Sandbox is the world's largest multiplayer game where you can create an avatar and interact with over 300,000 players and over 200 of your favorite brands directly in the game, including Snoop Dogg, Steve Aoki, The Walking Dead, FaZe Clan, and Tony Hawk. Over 90 experiences to play right now and way more on the way. My favorite experiences so far are Tony Hawk because, well, he's planning on creating a huge skate park experience and the childhood nostalgia is real, and of course Softstar because I love martial arts heroes and Eastern fantasy. There's also a ton of UGC content. You can build high-quality escape rooms, dungeon crawlers, and even a whole new world. Sandbox Season 3 is happening right now, but there's only a few more weeks left to claim rewards. They're giving away over 1.5 million sand, with the top prize being over 30,000. So don't miss out and follow these steps. Step 1, download the game for free using my link down below on your computer. You can still sign up and create an account on mobile using my link, but you'll need to play on desktop. Then create an account. Just sign in with Google, Facebook, or Twitter, and you're good to go. Step 3, load into an alpha lobby and use the map on the website to TP different experiences and start completing quests for points. Of course, don't forget to download Sandbox using my link in the description below. Now, this article comes from Clownfish TV. Shout out to Clownfish TV. They have a really nice YouTube channel as well. They cover similar stuff as me, but actually at like a higher level a lot of times, like the corporate dealings and stuff like that. Former classic G4TV technical director comments on G4TV closing. Quote, "Our past needed to be fixed?" Question mark. In the wake of the relaunch G4TV, by the way, again, clownfishtv.com, many have taken to social media to express their views on how Comcast handled resurrecting the doomed brand. By the way, not to speak on how they resurrected it, but I will say absolute cowardice and terrible floppy leadership, no spine, leaking to social media that they were closing down before talking to people directly. That was absolutely pathetic. And I don't care what you say about the people that worked at G4, they deserved better than that. While everyone felt empathy for those who lost their jobs, others debated on who or what was to blame for the network failing a second time. Some of the former and new G4TV hosts and personalities shared their thoughts online about the cancellation, but others' thoughts from former G4TV director posted their views on everything leading up to how it all went down. Chris Flynn, a former G4TV director, worked at the company from 2006 to 2012, up to when the network was canceled. He oversaw many of the technical elements of the show being aired at the time, including efforts and camera angles of Attack of the Show and more. Chris also worked for various productions at different studios in Hollywood before and after the origin of G4TV. Like many alumni from the original version of the network, Chris had many opinions and thought to share that they wanted to share about the new G4TV shutting down, including insight into the information he has learned when things went south. Quote, "I felt like they came back with a hollowed out version of Attack of the Show. I had advanced knowledge through inside sources 6 weeks ahead of time what they were doing and what their plan was. Sitting down for an interview with YouTube channel VGX7, Chris detailed that his source, who was rehired by G4TV, informed him that one of the ones in charge of the network had no intention of bringing back the older shows that were popular from the classic G4TV. Everything was going to focus on what was new, including a big connection to esports." Remember that huge esports channel that just died? They had like 500,000 subscribers. Whatever happened to them? Anyway, he also goes on to note that towards the latter part of the interview that the campaign #G4 needs talent was also a complete mess, where most of the talent added to the network was already decided well in advance. According to Chris's sources, the network was very scattered and didn't even figure out or have a crew as close to 2 weeks prior to the relaunch. Many people didn't know how to approach making things work. Stories coming out of the network were very bad, according to what Chris was being told by his sources. Some executives on shows and other people running wild and not doing much for nearly the whole time frame G4TV's Summer Beach House. You had some people who were supposedly running things and building the company, yet when the director would come in, they would be like, thank God you're here. This was the people who were the showrunners. Things got crazy enough that conflict between staff started to cause a lot of tension, with the shock of working on a real production schedule and trying to maintain order within the production caused people to leave. One of the biggest issues Chris notes from the new content produced from G4TV was the rotation of hosts and lackluster gags. Instead of having personalities tied to specific shows, newer content would cycle through the pool of talent and underutilize them. Some of the hosts would linger in the background during segments looking bored rather than allowing them to connect with the audience in the show where they were featured. Quote, typical TV would have 2 dedicated hosts. Instead of having everyone else twiddling their thumbs on the bench, they would be a role player on the bench. Everyone has a role to play. In the interview, Chris also goes on to discuss the differences in the talent between some of the newer hosts and older hosts. He knows that many things worked for new hosts that were coming from Twitch backgrounds didn't work for the audience watching. The same kind of gags would be rinsed and repeated when they didn't work. One day, Golden Boy is on Boosted, the next he's just sitting on a couch. They clearly felt like they were underutilized. The whole thing was a disaster. These people are just going to be sitting on a couch? Speaking on the layoffs, Chris expressed sympathy for those who got laid off most recently, with some of those people not even receiving severance pay after the new shutdown. That's shocking. The first group that got laid off got 4 to 6 months severance. Apparently, this last group didn't get any. Wow. Like, that's pretty brutal if true. I'll have to ask some of my sources about that. Some were trying to figure out how to get their personal belongings back because they couldn't even get back into the studio. One of the more interesting bits to come out of the interview was Chris' thought on how things transpired over controversial host Frosk and her speech to the audience. Quote, I understand you're all going to do whatever you want. You're a new G4 and I respect it. Just don't screw with our legacy. Once you had Frosk telling everyone to go to hell, now you're messing with our legacy. You're taking all that love and nostalgia that people had for us, and now they're questioning it. Chris went on to talk about some of the backlash and fallout from Indiana Black's posts on Twitter, including the now infamous tweet right after the first batch of layoffs. This is a person who needs to go away from social media and stop talking in public. Just stop. She said our mandate was to fix the past. Hold on for a second. Our past needed to be fixed? We lasted 12 years. Launched the careers of Olivia Munn and Chris Hardwick. You all crashed and burned in 11 months. And Frost said she's leaving the business. How can you say we needed to get fixed? Boom! Absolute savage. And by the way, 100% big true. 100% big true. And they also launched more careers than just those two as well. Then we get this article. And you can read the rest of the article over at Clownfish TV, their website. Nathan Grayson, which, by the way, this was retweeted by Frosk. Last weekend, G4 Comcast video game focused TV digital network collapsed following pivots and layoffs. I spent the past month talking to former G4 staff following the layoffs and the closure. This is a story why G4 failed. Former staffers described on a network with ever-shifting priorities from leadership that never settled down on how to develop an audience. Metrics for success would change regularly. There was never a clear viewership goal or a platform to prioritize. Well, that was obvious. The idea that you don't know how to cultivate viewership, though, that's absurd. You had a lot of e-celebs on that. This led to repeated pivots, former staff said. Shows would begin to find their voice, but when they didn't have funding anymore because it was too expensive, or the leadership was like, we care more about Twitch than YouTube today. G4 courted modern content creators as hosts and guests to try and pull up its numbers, offering hosts 6- and 7-figure annual salaries and guest day rates that topped out between $20,000 and $30,000, according to former staff. G4 would also pay content creators to raid into G4's Twitch channel in an attempt to boost numbers. For example, former employees said Pokimane once made $20,000 to do this. What? She got paid 20 large to do that. Problem was, guest spots and rates did little to improve G4's long-term prospects. Their audience rarely ever came over, said the former employee. The uptick in viewership did not match what we were paying for these episodes. Plus, you can bring all sorts of people in, but if the product isn't good, they're not going to come back. G4 staff also pointed the finger at Tucker Roberts, son of Comcast billionaire CEO, who is driving force behind G4's revival. Roberts had a large office based on Palpatine's throne room from Star Wars, but never even moved in. Roberts was supposed to be supplanted by Russell Aarons, who joined G4 as a president late last year, but the decisions ultimately came down from Aarons, Roberts, and Joe Marsh as an executive at Comcast Spectator and a close collaborator of Roberts. Aarons departed back in July after a heated all-hands meeting in which talent lambasted her for a lack of transparency on issues. She apparently left in tears. Ex-staff perceived her rocky tenure as evidence she was brought in to take the fall for Roberts. Former employees said they regularly worked late, and had to wear multiple hats, also to make up for a staff that was too small. Too small? Y'all had almost 100 people working there. They were underpaid. Did you just say the huge salaries? Even for the roles they were hired for, that applies to pretty much every single person on my team, except the people that were making six figures. I'm assuming that's people like the Completionist and Frosk and, you know, the what's his name? That he's kind of like beyond his prime now. I can't think of his name. He was on the MTV bit with Norm Macdonald, and he was cringe on there, and he used to do the interviews with Prawn Stars. Anyway, that kind of proves it right there. It always felt like there wasn't money, one former employee said. Really let us know that because they tried to use it as an excuse, well, we're just a startup. You're owned by Comcast. No, you're not a startup. G4TV hosts also regularly dealt with harassment from video after a video by ex-Play host Frosk, who she called out mean words. I mean, I don't know, other than Frosk, who else got any blowback from that. Then came the online blowback. In a response, G4 deleted a tweet supporting the segment and privated the video on YouTube. Behind the scenes, Frosk was told little could be done. Even as she was doxxed, they basically told her to be quiet, said a former contractor. Probably a good idea. Months of harassment turned G4 talent against each other. When layoffs came, the same YouTubers and sites helping stir up the harassment took to claiming that Frost near single-handedly tanked the network with her speech. By the way, I know they're referencing channels like mine. I never said that. The channel was doomed to fail from Jump Street. Former employees shot down conspiracy theory that Frosk ended G4. The views were just never good across the board. Once had to say that one person, her rant, had such an impact, it sank the company. It's absurd. Well, it definitely had an impact. That's why you deleted it, and that's why you privated it. Layoffs ravaged G4. Yikes. I mean, it was definitely the leadership, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's quite the bombshell. Make sure, if you get a chance, to check out Sandbox. It supports the channel. Support a good channel sponsor. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it. And if you haven't yet, YouTube just did a sub purge, so please make sure you're still subscribed or hit that red subscribe button today.